Okay.
Yeah, they will mute them. They're going to mute.
I'm just setting up the stream now. Okay, Menachem, I'll say bye.
Turn off the WhatsApp things the whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah, they will mute them. They're going to mute.
But then
I'm just setting up the stream now.
Called it's Kobe's birthday tonight. Yeah, so they called to say there's a lot of secular people.
I'm just setting up the stream now. 10 seconds more.
yeah,
Rabbi Shessel, is there a way to raise the front of these? Is there a way to raise the front?
Or whatever. That's it.
Above.
I don't know, maybe it's not that. So now that it's live, you can just shut it off.
Rabbi is there?
It's not so clear.
Rabbi
You
Twerski?
got it. It's not clear?
No.
No, Rabbi's very fuzzy.
Very fuzzy and very far.
Chaim, your camera was much clearer on Rabbi. It's very digitalized, and there's 240 people who are waiting to let in. Well, Chaim, can you put your video back on?
1 second, 1 second, 1 second.
Or maybe go off of, maybe go on or off Wi-Fi, whatever you're on, go on the other one.
Hi, Rabbi.
How's this?
You don't let this flashing, the microphone is muted. Red flash is what you have now. Is it flashing?
I see what you mean.
Okay, press it once.
So what, can we do your
Red
camera?
solid.
Yeah, but I'm not going to have access to my phone. I'm just worried that people are going to call in the whole time.
If you put it on airplane mode, does that work?
For what?
It's on
Also, you're in the set?
Yeah, Wi-Fi.
So can you go on Wi-Fi and then put it on airplane mode?
Whose phone is this?
It's mine, but we're not using it. We're all gonna have to do not disturb. That's it.
Oh, right.
Like that?
We don't. Yes, correct. We don't have a lot of time here.
Okay.
I am.
I'm going to need this.
What do you need, the card?
I'm going to need a longer cord that can plug into an iPhone.
I have it on the program. I just gave it to you.
This one?
But that's it.
Very good.
You pull. No. You pull it up. No, pull it. It's a spring.
What phone has a better, clearer picture than his?
They're not going to say anything.
I'm gonna shut mine off. Yes, I'm leaving. There you go.
What phone are we using?
I am.
Why is Chaim's better?
It's still solid. Okay, no,
It's still solid.
no flashing.
How's that? How's that?
Better. Still a little bit digital. Are you off Wi-Fi or on Wi-Fi?
Okay, I'm gonna go live right now with the camera.
I'm not sure this one.
Not sure. How's that?
This is not the Mahalach. You need
Are we good?
They can watch upstairs.
It's not working?
It's not the way to do it. It's not going to be clear.
Okay, give me a second. I'm not.
Right.
But what if I don't use Wi-Fi? What if I watch?
Yeah, that's totally fine.
Okay, I'll see if I can.
Okay, we're done. We gotta be ready. Ready? Okay, you have to use the other camera. The other
Maybe
camera's
you
still
have
there.
another laptop?
You flip the camera and use the other side.
I tried. They said it wasn't clear. We've got a connection problem down here.
It needs to be plugged
I
in.
expected Wi-Fi.
Is this okay, by the way?
Where's my Wi-Fi thing here? Where is it? Yeah, it's right over there.
Okay.
See this on live stream.
If Rabbi talks, what does it look like?
I don't know.
You're going live. Oh, yes.
Rabasha, this is good. This is it.
Okay, the event is up. We're live with the graphic.
Rabbi, can you hear us?
Shot set. Are you in manual focus?
It's automatic.
Well, can you lock it to manual?
Ryan,
No, it'll
All
try.
right, go ahead.
could Rabbi,
That's
Rabbi text,
Who is
like,
this?
you know, digital?
Closer ring.
All right, I'm stepping back away from here. You want to mute yourself?
If you want it further, you move it closer.
Okay, so we're admitting everybody then?
Yeah, admit everybody, and then you're live as far as I'm concerned.
You done? Yeah, you good? Rabbi, we'll be set in just a moment.
Chaimo, I mean, I look up this over here, right?
Well,
Rabbi saying Shilta.
Huh?
you know what? Can you go around and roll the carts in front of the sink? Sure.
I can do that.
No.
Grab your battery.
No, you got all that.
Aye. Okay, yeah, go the other way. That's fine. Forget it. Okay, that's fine.
Good.
We're good. We're good.
Stop.
We're good.
Stop.
Thank you for trying. Appreciate it. Okay, Rabbi, get in your position that you're comfortable with for the time being.
Okay.
Okay, and if we want to do where's your leg?
Rabbi?
Yeah.
Rabbi, can you hear me? Rabbi Twerski?
He can hear them. Can we hear him?
I don't know. I mean, I see it moving, so I think you just can't hear me.
Battery apple. Got it.
Reb Chaimo?
I don't see, it doesn't show any power. Oh, there we go. I can do it.
Again. There we go. Okay. Nice and even with lit. Very good. Okay. All right, now we got to set the shot again.
This thing is them.
There you go.
Okay, that's beautiful. Okay, we're gonna start wide and then we're gonna zoom in. Okay. Good. Here we go. Ready, Rabbi?
This is the mute. I'll mute it.
Yep. Okay, hang on. As soon as Yosef presses that button, the audio will be on.
Which equipment isn't working?
No, it's all right. There's no way for me to test it now. If I end the event, I don't know that I can restart it. If you can't restart it, it will end because it's a one-time event.
What event setup?
Everybody waiting on the Zoom. They're just having a technical difficulties. It starts shortly. They're just trying to set up Rabbi. That it should be good. Everybody on the Zoom over here, go to Twerski.today. It's www.twerski.today. It's live over there. They're not set up on the Zoom over here, so please try it over there.
Maybe I start over.
I'm getting double. I don't know why I'm getting double sound from someone. Probably not. Oh, so it's me. Okay. No, the Zoom call is not working at all.
Guys, we're trying to make it work over here. If anybody wants, they can go to Twerski. There's a website, Twerski.today. And they can watch it over there. Rabbi's over there now. And meanwhile, they're trying to get it to work. Everybody can go to Twerski, TWERSKI.today. Say that again?
They said screen share. Can you do that?
I could screen share. Should I try to screen share?
Yeah, he's gonna try to screen share.
Hold on, I'm gonna try to do something hop here. Hold on.
Direct people. Their phone is dead.
My two older brothers were married when we
He's
were
trying to connect. Hold on, he's trying to.
years old.
Just
So it was Shia. And I'm going to refer to him as Rabbi Dr. Abraham Joshua as Shia. In the rest of my remarks, it was Shia who really was our link to that phase in our lives when we felt loved and safe and secure and protected and that the world was a good place. With the passing of Shia, the last pillar of that world for the child within me disappeared. And it's not that I don't have so much that I'm grateful for. I have Baruch Hashem, a wonderful Rebbitzin and children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren and friends who are extremely devoted and supported. But my little child does not quite recognize that their presence in the same way that it related to my parents and my siblings. So Shia's death tore away from me something that, despite the geographical difference between us, I know we were here in America and he was in Israel, but I knew that someplace in the world there was someone who my 7-year-old child knew was there for me in a way in which, no matter what went on in the world, I knew I could count on the fact that he had my back. So this is not anything that is logical or reasonable. It's just something that is. It's a feeling, and it's a feeling that I believe that is very important for us to understand has a great deal to do with the grief that we feel and the sense of loss that we feel when someone, one of our parents or one of our older siblings passes on. So I've sensed that dimension within my person is not quite the same as it was before. It's trembling and frightened and uncertain about the future. The second thing I want to relate to is the place of memories. Generally speaking, when two people meet, what's happening in our understanding is that there are two people who are meeting in the moment. So we each bring into the moment, we bring whatever our personal interest is that's under discussion, whatever the premise for our interaction is. But with the kinds of interactions that take place between members of a closely knit family, and again, the kind of feelings that are transmitted when two brothers or two siblings meet, who've grown up together, who share a common history and a common background and a good deal of common genetics. But what happens is it's not just something that is a meeting between two people in the moment. There are two people who are bringing their entire history with them. This is a meeting of an entire spectrum, an entire gestalt of two people whose memories are joined from 60, 70 years, whose feelings, whose experiences are such that they understand each other and know each other and communicate with each other in ways that transcend the kinds of conventional communications. So we know that there are certain words or phrases and idioms in our culture, in Western culture, that don't mean the same when in India or in Israel. We may use the same words, but they don't mean the same. They don't reference the same things, the same concepts or the same phenomena. But that even in the same culture, even in the same community. But if you have two individuals who have grown up together, who are part of a family, they're somehow the words that we use, the idioms that we use, the way in which we reference things is very much dependent on our joint experience with those experiences and those phenomena. So when we communicate with each other, it's a much different kind of communication. And even though we could not define it, even though we can't analyze it, but there's no question about the fact that when I sat down with my brother, that there was something, there was a certain energy in that, in our sitting down together, which had nothing at all to do necessarily with the immediate words that we were using, so much as they were an expression of the fact that we belonged to a certain a unified, a certain ineffable beginning, an ineffable source, and that really was a product of shared memories. And I think we need to recognize that we are our memories. Not that we are imprisoned by them or limited by them, but we are a product of our memories. And to the extent that we understand our memories, we also begin to understand our reactions to and our communications in the moment when we're addressing the issues in our lives. So when we were growing up, and my older brothers were already married and out of the house, it was Shia. Shia was there, and he was the one who, when there was a big snow, he would take us outside and he would make a snowman with us, or he would make a fort out of bricks made of packed snow. If we needed someone to help us in a baseball game, he was there to help us in playing baseball. And when he returned from Bobov, when he was a Talmud in the Bobov Yeshiva, when my uncle came right after the Second World War and began to rebuild the Bobov Chassidos, and he started in Manhattan in 1947, I believe it was. Shia was there. He was one of its first Talmidim, and he came back home and he taught us Baba Vanaginim. He taught me and my twin brother Baba Vanaginim. He taught us Shilam Alos and Ma'ashiv and Kvoidai and Azai Bashlishi and many of the nigunim, many of the melodies that connected us with my mother's forebearers and a family that we were yet to get to learn, but he was our teacher in connecting us with that part of our heritage. And then when we needed to go on to the yeshiva, it was Shia who taught us. He taught us for months before we went to the yeshiva to prepare us for the interviews, and it was a remarkable experience, and it propelled us into the yeshiva world at a very great advantage, which helped us for many years through our yeshiva years, both in B'Smelech Shatela and in Ner Yisrael, and subsequently Lakewood and B'Smelech Shelian for my twin brother. So, and of course, then there were all the rest of the memories of being together at Simchas and the many times that we needed to rely on Shia when we needed a shoulder to cry on or some advice to bank on. So all of those memories, many of them, which frankly, if somebody were to ask me to recall them, I would not be able to. I don't know that I'd be able to do so, but there's no question about the fact that they are there as a fire burning in the hearth, warming and inspiring and coaching and urging and doing all the kind of things that those kinds of memories represent. And I know that the person that I am, the person that my twin brother is, the person that my brother's immediate family are an expression. They're a living articulation of those many memories, all of which were memories of integrity and memories of caring and memories of belonging to one another. And those kinds of things, those memories, when my brother was alive, were a bridge between us. Not only when we were in the same room together, at the same table together, but when thousands of miles away, I knew that those memories were connection between us. So I want to come back to those issue of memories a little bit later. I want to talk a little bit now specifically about my brother. Now, anybody who's been who's read a newspaper, a magazine, a Jewish magazine, or has been on the web and has seen his name pop up on a variety of different places, many of them secular places, have read in the various obituaries the many things that my brother had achieved during the course of his lifetime. He was a stellar Talmid Chacham. He had a magnificent command of all of all of our literature, Gemara and the commentaries on Tanakh and Halacha. He was a magnificent Talmid Chacham. He was an inspiring Baltfili. When he davened, he carried the congregation with him with his enthusiasm, and he was a terrific Baal Tukeya. On Rosh Hashanah, he was flawless when during the Tukiyas. He could pick up almost any shofar and make it sing. He was a composer of music, as everybody has heard already. His melody, Yoshia Samecha, is an internationally sung melody. It was composed over 60 years ago at Mayofruf, and it traveled across the ocean and came back many times over, and is sung by virtually every conceivable Jewish constituency knows this melody of Oshia Samecha, and my brother instructed that they sing that melody as they escorted his body to burial, because he felt it was such a issue of merit. He was also a composer of Gramin, which is our ballads, which he composed both in Yiddish and in English, and his genius was evident in all of those things, both in the melodies and in the lyrics. He was a moel. He was a shochet. He could sit down at a piano and pound out a tune. I mean, he wasn't a virtuoso piano player, but he could pound out a respectable tune on the thing. And of course, he was a medical doctor, and he was a psychiatrist and an author of over 90 books and probably thousands of articles that were printed in many, many magazines. He was an internationally acclaimed authority on the addictions, all of the addictions, and supportive of a variety of programs. He created several hospitals for the addictions, which were considered the finest facilities of their kind in Pennsylvania, and of course he was a father and a grandfather and a great-grandfather and a great-great-grandfather to a very, very special family. That being said, all of those things are not things that we can really aspire to. I don't think that if we don't have a gift of music, that we can compose music, and if we don't have a particular proclivity to making words rhyme, then we're not going to make ballads, and many of us don't have the patience to become doctors or the wherewithal to become psychiatrists, and many of us probably couldn't blow the shofar if it was something that you could hum into. But so those aren't really things that we can copy. Those aren't things that we can imitate or emulate. Those are God-given gifts, and I think my brother understood them to be God-given gifts, and he never, ever allowed them to become a source of arrogance. They did not qualify in his mind as the kind of of things that made him in any which way feel that somehow that he was a better person than another person. And that was one of his great virtues, is that there was no one in his presence ever felt that he was anything other than, at the very least, the equal of him, if not more. So he knew that Hashem had endowed him with a very sharp mind and a good voice and an incredible memory. He remembered things from the time that he was 2 years old, and he could repeat them with great clarity. He had a remarkable memory, and he had basically had a very temperate nature. So he was a pretty laid back and cool kind of a person. So that's not going to be helpful to any of us. So I really would I'd like to focus on the kind of things that perhaps we could learn from him. And I want to begin by saying the following. My brother Shia took his talents and his gifts seriously, not himself, but his gifts and his talents. And it's not to say that that he disdained COVID or that he disliked when people honored him. I don't think that's true. I think he probably enjoyed the fact that when people honored him, but he didn't need it, and that's the important. He didn't need it. He didn't want it. He was dismissive of it. In that regard, he was a very great disciple of my father, blessed memory. My father, had no need whatever to be honored or to have people give all kinds of accolades in his direction. That was not one of his things. He would come into a simcha. My father would sit down someplace in an obscure place, only to find that the Bali Simcha, that the people who were the ones who were celebrating whether it was a wedding or a Shabbat, whatever it was, would demand that he come up and sit at the front at the head table. But that was not one of the things that was ever important to him. And my brother Shia was a very, very strong disciple of that. Issue of how worthless COVID was. So my brother did really, although I'm sure he enjoyed it, but he didn't need it. And if people said things to him, and in a situation where he could wave it off, he would dismiss it offhandedly. But he did take his gift seriously. He knew that he had talents, and he respected them. My brother was a consummate giver. His entire life was basically focused on finding ways in which he could give to others, enrich others, heal others, inspire others. It was always about giving. He was not I don't think he was a very comfortable receiver or a beneficiary, but he was very, very invested in giving, and he made his life a career of giving. And in order to be able to do that, it was very important to him that he not judge people. And there was no such thing in my brother's presence as judging another person, whether or not he was worthy of receiving or whether he was worthy of being helped or so on. And everybody to him was this diamond waiting to be polished, and someone who was precious, someone who was chaviv adam sheniv, would tell him a person is beloved. because he is created in the image of God. So I think one of the reasons that that he was so, in a certain sense, oblivious to the need to be recognized or acknowledged or honored was the fact that he had no time for it. His focus was so much on doing something to change people, to help people, to inspire people, that he really didn't have any time to want to have someone focus on himself. And everybody felt very, very comfortable with him. And I believe that it wasn't just that he was focused on giving, but because he also focused on the good in people. There, of course, in his career as a counselor to people who were addicts and alcoholics and all kinds of difficult personality presentations, he managed to find and focus on and build on the good in other people. And when people were in his presence, no matter who they were, from the great to the probably the very dysfunctional and those who were somewhere near the bottom of the barrel, they all felt that they were in the presence of someone who was looking at them with regard, who was looking at them respectfully, who found something good inside of them, and because of that was able to look up to them. And that was no less true of perfect strangers, and it was no less true of myself as his brother. When I was with him, I felt supported. I felt valued. I felt that that he was focused on whatever I had that was worthy of respect. And he was, in that sense, he was the fulfillment of what it says in Pirkei Avos, in the ethics of our fathers. Who is a wise person now? Who learns from everyone. He learned from everybody. And everybody had a sense that when he was dealing with them, that he was learning from them. He would come back from the 12-step meetings, the AA meetings, and different kinds of meetings that he would attend from considerable regularity. And he was inspired and moved and enlightened by things that people brought into that forum of how they grew, how they overcame a mistake, how they dealt with failure, how they were able to pick up the pieces of their lives, and he learned from everyone. And in that sense, he was a Talmid Chacham, who was a student of wisdom. So what was the driving force, or what were the driving forces in his life? The ones that we can learn from. So I would suggest the following. Number one, we have to be honest and aware of the gifts that we have. I think that it's absolutely essential that we don't become couch potatoes, that we don't just sink into the cushions of whatever the contours of our life, and say to ourselves, okay, now I'm comfortable here. This is okay for me. I think we need to be. We need to look into ourselves and say, there are things I can do. There are things that I can become. There are talents that I can that I can explore, and that I can, and potential that I can actualize. And we need to do so because in truth, those are the things that are going to overcome that terrible, vast emptiness, which is really the precursor of all addictions, the void, the emptiness that's inside of us when we feel that somehow that the light inside of us has gone out and that we're not really productive, creative. The human spirit needs to be productive, needs to be creative, and that was one of the things that drove my brother, and that he was always aware of and exploring and actualizing his many gifts. And it doesn't matter whether you have 10 gifts, 20 gifts, or one gift, and it doesn't matter how good you are. That's one of the second things is that is very important for us to understand, and that is that my brother was not inhibited by the need to be perfect. He understood the need for us to do our best. He understood the need for us to be conscientious. He understood the need for us to give, to be excellent in our own capacity of excellence. But he also understood what a destructive force perfection was, because when we need to be perfect, then all kinds of things begin to destroy and obstruct our ability to tear ourselves out of our comfort zone. So thing number two is not only just to recognize that we have certain gifts, talents, proclivities, whatever they may be, and they don't necessarily have to be artistic or musical or literary or somehow be in a leadership position. There are so many things that we can do that are perhaps very, very pedestrian, but they're important. And our ability to touch lives and our ability to be able to show caring for others, for us to do better, whether it's in prayer or in learning or in helping different communal activities to be able to become more effective. There are so many things that every one of us can do and should do, and would make us flower and prosper and go. We would feel so much more alive if we discomforted ourselves with those kinds of things that help us develop those gifts, and for us to do them in the very best way we know how, not just to kind of just throw a bone to them, but for us to really work at the kinds of things that we recognize in ourselves, and to seize opportunities, for us to be aware of opportunities, to be able to give to the world and to give to others, and to be able to develop a skill or an opportunity. And for the understanding how that really at the core of being godlike, which is perhaps one of the uppermost values that is part of our Judaic ideology, is to be a giver. God is the supreme giver, and when we give, we become godlike, and there is nothing that infuses us with more integrity and more excitement and more fulfillment in life than this thing about being a giver, and the peculiar what appears to be something of a contradiction, that the more we give, the richer we are. The more we give away, the more we have. not particularly welcome sounds from the Torah community, the religious community. He spoke about and wrote about spousal abuse when people were hushing it up and when people did not want to admit that those things could possibly happen in from homes. And while it may be a minimal phenomenon, nonetheless, it was, in terms of a community that was growing exponentially, it was something that we had to deal with in greater numbers, and that we had to create the wherewithal to help families that were and couples that were suffering in that regard. Ultimately, 4 or 5 years after they heaped a good deal of tried to discredit him, they called large assemblies from all of the great rabbinic leaders to address that problem, and his vision and his honesty at that time was recognized, and that was also true of substance abuse in the religious community and some of the other addictions, which are not particularly the kinds of things that we want to acknowledge, but to the extent that we live in a culture which is suffused with and so polluted by and so corrupted by so many of these things that make everything so available, we are affected by them, and we needed to be able to create the wherewithal to deal with them. My brother dealt with them courageously, and the only reason he had the courage to do so is because he was not preoccupied with self. He was looking at a world that needed to be needed to be healed, and a world that needed to be enriched. And when he saw that there was a problem, he was one of the people who was going to, whatever the cost of himself, he was going to bring it to the attention of the frum world. So he was an individual whose lack of preoccupation with his own ego, not that he didn't have one, but it didn't. He was too busy to really allow his ego to dominate his life, and as a result, he became a supreme giver and someone who inspired and whose name is a legend, and not only in our frum world, but in the secular world, and not only in the Jewish world, but in the non-Jewish world. It's his contributions are regarded with great admiration and reverence. He was always cognizant of the fact that he looked like a Jew. He had a beard and payas and wore a long frock of Hasidim, and he understood that his life had to reflect the finest conduct, the finest integrity, the finest attributes of sensitivity to every situation, every person, in a way in which his behavior, his conduct, his entire person would be a kiddush Hashem, would be a sanctification of the divine name. As the Gemara says in Yuma, that people would look at him and say, Ashri Eladite, how fortunate are the parents who gave birth to such a person? How fortunate are the teachers who taught him? How fortunate is the Torah that lives in this person? So he was aware of that, and I think that never left his consciousness, and his life was, in fact, a tribute to the divine discipline, to the way in which a Torah Jew needs to live and to conduct himself. There were many people of many different stripes who my brother brought back to the observance of Torah and mitzvahs. Not the least of which was a young man who, when he was in our community at the age of 10, 11, 12, and so on, my brother was makar of him. My brother paid attention to him, and he went on to though he did not come from a religious home, but he went on to go to the various seminaries and yeshivos, and from there he went to Israel, and he became the most legendary makarev of Rechokim in history. Meir Schuster. Meir Schuster was someone who was mekurev by my brother Shia, and I'm certain that all of those thousands, perhaps tens of thousands of nefashos and souls that were brought back to Yiddishkeit and to Torah by Meir Schuster during his many years of work in Jerusalem are all in the asset column of my brother, who was so influential in then Stanley Schuster, Meir Schuster's life. So, but there were many young Jewish people who went through his program in withdrawal from addictions, who he would invite to his home and who became Bali Tshuva. They were brought back to the observance of Torah and mitzvahs through his caring and his inspiration. So my brother had that kind of another. There was another facet of his life. So I want to go back and just kind of summarize a couple of things. The things that we can learn from my brother, that are things that are not dependent on the fact that we're not geniuses or the fact that we're not musicians or whatever the case is. We can learn to be aware of what we do have, whatever talents we have, whatever gifts Hashem has given us. Second of all, we need to try to develop them and do our best with them, and not to be perfect. If there's one thing that was very clear, was that he was never arrested by or incarcerated by the need to do something, although whatever he did blazingly well. But it was only because he did his best, which was considerable. But he did not have that pathology of perfection. Because he was a giver, he watched for opportunities to give, and watched for opportunities to grow, and watched for opportunities to share. And certainly one of the lessons of his life is be a giver as much as you can. It will fulfill you. It will bring light to the darkness in your life. It will bring excitement and fulfillment to your life, and will dissipate the emptiness. Don't get stuck on COVID. Don't wait to be acknowledged. There's nothing that's worthwhile in that. Learn from everyone. Everyone has something to teach us. And if we know that everyone has something to teach us, the moment that we are engaged in any kind of an interaction with somebody, that person will feel that we are looking up to them. It will change the energy of that relationship. Look for the good in everyone. Focus on what people have that's right and that's good, and let that be the basis of your relationship. Live a Kiddush Hashem. Live in a way in which your life is a sanctification of the divine name. I want to close with going back to some of the things that I said at my earliest remarks. remember that our children and perhaps our grandchildren are a seed, a little twig in the ground a vine in the ground that's growing, that wants to be valued, that wants to be protected, that wants to be respected, that wants to be cared for, and that child is going to escort your child or your grandchild or your student or your friend throughout the rest of their lives. You can have that kind of an impact on someone if you understand that the child does not go away. And if a child grows up in a home where they're screaming, or it's a dysfunctional home, which is an abusive home, that child is going to carry a wounded, mutilated child with them into the rest of their lives, which will be hypersensitive to many, many things that will destabilize them, that will create unnatural kinds of needs, and will make for people who are not able to live fulfilling lives. Be so respectful and so vigilant about the fact that all of us are walking around with a little child, and that child trembles and quivers and shakes, depending on what or the surrounding influences in those early years. Remember that a human being is a creative organism, that the Almighty has made us in His image, and that as He is creative, that we need to be creative. If we stop being creative, if we ignore our gifts, our talents, the things that God has placed within us, if we don't use them, develop them, actualize them, if we don't become people who can share those gifts with others to give to the world, that we are allowing for a terrible darkness and a void to occupy at the center of our lives. And it's going to demand more and more energy, and some of which may come in very destructive forms, in order to compensate for that. And that was, in a certain sense, the message that moved my brother to do the many things that he did. It was to fill people's lives with light. So that's my current summary of the things that present themselves in trying to keep that flame alive in my life, and I suspect that there will be many more such lessons that I will continue to discover as time goes on. But for now, I think that's a good beginning. And if there are any comments that people have to make, they're welcome to forward them to whatever address comes up. Is there an address there, an email address that people can?
Go to the page there.
Huh? Oh,
They can contact you at the show.
what?
At BethYehuda.org.
They can talk at BethYehuda.org. Okay. Thank you for listening.
All those watching here tonight, everybody should know they set up a fund. It's plus for El Nishmas, Twerski. You can go to the website to BethYehuda.org, and you can donate. And they're using the money obviously for funds, for people that need help, therapy, and all different things. So again, here's the ad for it. You can go again to BethYehuda.org, and please give some money. Rabbi Dr. Abraham J. Twerski. Thank you all for joining tonight.